Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and this is a video message to the members of the Minnesota Libertarian Party. I am really sorry that I could not make your convention. I really tried valiantly to do so. My plan was to arrive in Minneapolis on Saturday evening and then drive to Duluth. Well, I got tied up in Dallas because of thunderstorms, and the flight was delayed till midnight, and finally they canceled it. So I ended up spending the night in the airport, and the next morning they delayed the flight out by an hour and a half or a couple hours, and so I was done. I arrived in Minneapolis, but too late to get to y'all's debate. So I'm very sorry about that, and I want to thank you for letting me communicate what I would have said in that debate in this video message. It's our job in this party to lead America to freedom. That's our job. Democrats can't do that. Republicans can't do that. Only we libertarians can do that. But that's what my objection is to the message that has come to define our party and our presidential campaigns for the last 20 years. It is a message that cannot lead America to freedom. It is a message of libertarian socialism and serfdom reform. Let me give you a couple of examples. Social Security and Medicare. These are the crown jewels of American socialism. And I stand for the immediate repeal of these socialist programs. Because if you want to be free, you got to dismantle socialism. And you got to start somewhere by making the case for the dismantling of these two socialist programs. Now, my opponents, virtually all of them at the South Carolina Libertarian Party debate several months ago, took me to task vociferously. They said I lacked care and compassion, that we needed to continue this program for another generation, like 25 years. They called it an off-ramp, and said that if we did what I want to do with freedom through the immediate dismantling of these socialist programs, there'd be people dying in the streets. Pure nonsense. But it shows you what an insidious philosophy socialism is, where it can inculcate this mindset in even libertarians. There's no care and compassion in continuing this program, even for one day. This is a program that's based on the initiation of force, taxation, income taxation, that takes money from one group of people and gives it to another group of people through the Internal Revenue Service, one of the most tyrannical agencies in U.S. history. That is not care and compassion, wanting to continue this type of socialist program that's based on a violation of our core principle, the non-aggression principle, and the pledge that we all take. But most important, we have to lead America in the restoration of faith in freedom and voluntary charity. Nobody be dying in the streets. This is pure nonsense. America lived without socialism for more than 100 years. The result was the most prosperous nation in history and also the most charitable nation in history. Medicare and Medicaid destroyed what had been the finest healthcare system in the world. In history, where prices were low and stable before Medicare and Medicaid, and this is the root cause of the healthcare crisis, these massive socialist programs. We get rid of them, and all of a sudden, the crisis goes away. Prices become low and stable once again. Let me give you another example. Immigration controls. Classic socialist system. It's based on the socialist principle of central planning. This is what Ludwig von Mises called planned chaos, which is what we had on the border for 100 years. I grew up on the border. I lived almost half my life there. And I lived under this socialist system, socialist central planning, where the government centrally plans the movements of millions of people in one of the most complex labor markets in history. It cannot be done without chaos, crisis, death, suffering, and a massive police state. This is one of the issues that separates us out again in this party. All of my opponents in this party want to continue with this socialist program of immigration controls in one form or another. Some are more fierce and they want to get the military involved, and others are like Biden and they want to let in more immigrants. But the operative word is let. When you hear let and freedom, you're talking about opposites. I've been saying for 30 years. I published a book 30 years ago called The Case for Free Trade and Open Immigration. Co-edited it, making the case that there is only one solution to this immigration morass. Only one. And that's freedom and free markets, open borders, the free movements of goods, services, and people across borders. There is no other solution. And this is what we have to take to the American people. The case for freedom and free markets in this area of immigration. We have to lead the way. Now, my opponents say, well, you can't get votes. Only we can get votes with our immigration control position. No, they can't. If they could get votes with immigration control reform, our presidential candidate 3 years ago would have gotten much more than just 1.1%. We've got two candidates in the race right now that ran for Congress with this reform message: reform Social Security, reform the FDA, reform monetary policy, reform immigration. And what was the result? Chase Oliver ran for Senate, ran a first-class campaign, got massive amounts of publicity, got into the debate against a sitting U.S. senator, got his message out to every voter in Georgia, 2%. Same with Mike Tremont. First-class campaign with the 20th Congressional District in Florida, got into the debates, less than 1%. And now we're at 0 to 1% now. So we already know the results for November. If voter sentiment hasn't gotten any better and actually gotten worse over the last 3 years, nothing's going to change over the next 5 or 6 months unless we change directions. And this is what I've been saying from the start of this campaign. We need to change directions in this party dramatically, completely. We got to give the American people something they're not expecting. And that is a campaign of pure libertarian principles. Separate healthcare in the state, education in the state, money in the state, economy in the state. Legalize all drugs. Dismantle the national security state. Don't reform it. Restore a limited government republic to our land. Bring all the troops home. Discharge them. Abandon all foreign military bases. This is an open borders. And repeal socialism immediately. Now, my opponents say, oh, well, Jacob, your message can't garner votes either. Nonsense. This is the only thing that can garner votes. And remember, we're a political party, not a debating society, not a membership organization. Our job is to get votes, not at the expense of our principles, though. And our job is to lead America to freedom and in the process garner a large number of votes. I took this message to the voters of Virginia 20 years ago in a race for U.S. Senate against one of the most popular senators in the history of our state, John Warner, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, right after the 9/11 attacks. And I knew I wouldn't get one Republican vote. It was a no-brainer. And of course, especially since I was saying what Ron Paul would say later on, that U.S. foreign policy had motivated the 9/11 attacks. The Democrats weren't running anybody, but I knew I wouldn't get any Democrat protest votes, and I didn't care about that either. I didn't target them for votes. I'm calling for the repeal of their favorite socialist programs, Social Security, Medicare, public schooling, and so forth. Nonetheless, I garnered 7% of the statewide vote. And my opponents in the party were mocking and ridiculing me. They were saying with this radical principled message of liberty that I would garner 0.01, 0.02. I garnered 7% of the statewide vote because I changed the targeted audiences. I ran a low-cost guerrilla campaign. I didn't have any money, but I targeted, for example, black voters. One of the biggest honors I ever got was the endorsement of one of the most prominent black ministers in the country. He was the minister of the Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. I went and met with him. He didn't know me from Adam. I told him everything I stood for, repeal of socialism and get rid of immigration controls. I told him, I said, Pastor Peterson, what we're doing to immigrants and have been for 100 years violates God's sacred commandment, the second greatest commandment. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And at the end of this conversation, one of the biggest honors of my life, he wrote out a letter of endorsement. He says, Mr. Hornberger, you take this letter of endorsement to every black minister in the state and tell him I'm endorsing you. And I did. And I also targeted Hispanic voters on open borders. I said, spread the word. There's a Senate candidate. And boy, their eyes were this big and they were excited. And I ended up garnering 7% of the statewide vote. And I have no doubts that constituency has doubled or tripled. And that therefore I keep telling convention after convention, we don't have to settle for 0 to 1%. We can achieve a major breakout of 10 to 15%. But the price to be paid is the restoration of our founding principles, the founding libertarian brand of principled libertarianism. And that's not a high price to pay. This is a good price to pay. This puts our party on a sound foundation instead of a foundation of sand. We put it on a foundation of rock. And then we run a campaign based on that principled campaign. And that's what I'm calling for in this campaign. A total shift, dramatic shift, complete shift in the direction and the restoration of our principles. This is how we lead America to freedom. And this is how we achieve a major breakout in votes. Thank you again.